Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for Week 13. We're going to go through the quarterback and the tight end rankings in this video. I think it makes sense to condense these two down. So that is the plan of attack. Before we get to that, of course, before I do the quarterbacks, I will recap how I did for my quarterback DFS buys as well as my love 'em and my fade 'em last week. And then same thing for the tight ends before I start talking about the tight ends. You can find my rankings all throughout the week up at the website, www.thefforge.com. They will be up by Wednesday evening at the latest, is always the plan, sometimes maybe Thursday morning. And you can also find an updated rankings video that comes out on Saturday. And of course, on Sunday, 3 hours prior to kickoff of the main slate of games, I will be here for any of your start-sit questions. Also on Thursday, 2 hours, hour and a half, I don't remember what I was doing, probably 2 hours prior to the game, I will be live here on YouTube as well for any start-sit questions. So, without any further ado, let's recap how I did with my Week 12 DFS buys. For last week, I did a little bit differently. I picked one for the Thursday slate, picked someone for the Sunday slate. And for the quarterback position, actually, I picked two on the Thursday slate. I said that I would happily accept the Brock Purdy discount at $6,100. Turned out not to be a discount, and so he finished 23rd on the week. Wasn't worth it there. But I also couldn't help myself by saying, basically, I felt it was worth paying up for Dak Prescott at $6,800. He finished third on the week, so at least I got that in there. That is why I ended up having to. And for the Sunday slate, I said at $6,400 that I would take a shot on Trevor Lawrence. He finished sixth on the week, so I don't know if he was like fourth or fifth on the Sunday slate, but somewhere up there. Pretty solid finish for him. My love him was also Trevor Lawrence, so we know that he finished sixth on the week. And my fade him was Matt Stafford, who finished seventh on the week. So big fat fail there on fading Matt Stafford. Happy to see I was wrong there, though. That would be great if he can be good for the rest of the season. Now let's get on to the quarterback rankings. By the way, we went over 500 subscribers over the weekend, so thank you very much to everybody and everyone, I think I just said. And to those who are new to the channel, if you're seeing these videos for the first time, these are my projections that you're seeing up on the screen, but the order that the players are in are my rankings. And red is good, blue is bad, white is neutral. For all three of these right here is a matchup gauge, so red is obviously, a good matchup. And this is just an expected range projections on the lower end, maybe a below average game, to on the higher end, an above average game, based on what the quarterback has done up to this point in the season and based on what the defense that they're facing has done up to this point in the season. So this is my first tier, and typically these are going to be my must starts. And for the most part, I don't think that there's much explanation ever needed. So Jalen Hurts is my QB1 on the week. Dak Prescott, QB2. Brock Purdy, QB3. Patrick Mahomes at 4. Tua Tagovailoa at 5. He was definitely one of the candidates who I thought second, first, maybe. But it's so hard to get away from Jalen Hurts and what he offers you in that ceiling that he obviously has to be the QB1. And Dak Prescott's not a very terrible matchup. He's been playing great. Brock Purdy against Philadelphia, you feel good about his floor for the most part. Most weeks it's very good. And you got to love the ceiling going up against Philadelphia. So that's why he ends up falling here. But Tagovailoa is definitely going to be a candidate to be moved up ahead of Patrick Mahomes here. We'll see where that ends up. But going up against Washington, I do love that matchup. I do think that there is a chance, however, that it's going to be, a Miami rushing game. And once again, a whole lot is not going to be asked of Tua. I think it really comes down to this Washington offense and if they can click on all cylinders or not. And if they can, really a potential for a big game here for Tua. And then CJ Stroud I have in at quarterback 6, and Trevor Lawrence just sneaks into this tier after a rough season up to this date at my QB 7. I'm not 100% confident in this. I think ETN could take over this game against Cincinnati. But for the most part, if I have him, I'm starting him this week against Cincinnati. I'm not too afraid. I at least like the floor for him. That's going to bring us to a tiny second tier here where I have Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. As far as Justin Herbert, New England is right up there as one of the worst quarterback matchups that there is to face, and Herbert has overcome some poor matchups similar to the New England matchup. However, they also haven't, and most recently they haven't against Baltimore just this last weekend. So, there is some concern there, and with Eckler not being himself, and with this offense being down to really Keenan Allen being the only real weapon that Justin Herbert can rely upon, it's making it easy, I think, for defenses to limit this offense. It's making it tough for Justin Herbert. It's putting really all the weight of this team on Justin Herbert to succeed, and I don't think it's been very easy for him. So I am concerned about Justin Herbert, but based on how well he's done season long, I'm still probably going to be starting him with confidence. And Kyler Murray I'm also concerned about here, going up against Pittsburgh. They're right up there as well as one of the worst quarterback matchups, and I do believe that they're going to be getting a couple of pieces back this week on that defense, Minkah Fitzpatrick to name one of them, so it's probably going to be an even better defensive unit going forward. And as you can see in the projection, he is a risky start. He came through last week. That's absolutely fantastic, but there is a chance that Kyler Murray, because of not showing us more in the passing game, not being better in the passing game since his return, if the rushing attack, if he doesn't get any rushing touchdowns, if that doesn't come together, then he could be in line for a poor week if he's not improving in that passing attack. And he very might struggle on the ground and through the air against this defense, especially because TJ Watt and Cam Hayward will probably make it pretty tough for him on the ground. So those are my concerns for Kyler Murray, and at the end of the day, he is my fatum of the week, and I sure hope I'm wrong because he's going to be my quarterback without Justin Fields being out. And that's going to bring us on to my third tier with Russell Wilson, Sam Howell, Jared Goff, Jordan Love. As far as Wilson and Howell go, I am optimistic about both of them given the matchups going up against Houston, Miami, respectively for those two. And I expect that for Sam Howell, that Washington is going to come out slinging in this game. I believe they have the most pass attempts per game on the season already, but I expect that to be all the more in this game against Miami, and I do expect them to be forced to continue to have to sling and not be able to turn over to Brian Robinson with any kind of lead at any point in this game. And Miami is a middling matchup for quarterbacks, so nothing to be too afraid of here for Sam Howell. Hopefully it can be one of those good games for him, and that is why I love Sam Howell. I do think there is a good chance that he will have a big game. Maybe one of those games where he sucks for the first half and then just absolutely dominates throughout the second half in an easier type of matchup. We'll see. Then Jared Goff and Jordan Love are kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum. I am pessimistic about them given the matchups going up against New Orleans and Kansas City, respectively, for those two. So that is where my concern for them comes from. Let's move on to my, what are we on, fourth tier here with Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew, Matt Stafford from quarterback 14 to 17. For Derek Carr, Detroit Lions, they are a good matchup for quarterbacks. And the real question here this week for Carr, though, and probably why he's not in the tier above this, is can he take advantage of this matchup without many of his wide receiver weapons? And honestly, I mean, who knows? Possibly. He might be able to. He is a candidate to be moved down for me depending on where I end up lining up with thinking if he can overcome that or not, and ultimately also how much I think that they're going to maybe lean on Taysom Hill in this game. That's a possibility. Then for Baker Mayfield, Carolina is the fourth worst quarterback matchup, so don't get overly excited about this matchup for him. And I think the real question is going to be can Rachaad White take advantage of this Carolina rushing defense, because they absolutely suck, and that's why most teams don't have to pass against them a whole lot. They can just run the ball a lot. And ultimately, I don't know for sure that he can. I tend to lean towards just enough in order for maybe the ceiling at the very least of Baker to be limited this week. Then Gardner Minshew I have in at quarterback 16, and Tennessee is not the smash matchup for quarterbacks that it was at the beginning of this season. Teams can run on this defense quite well, better than they have been able to for years. But there is a silver lining here for Gardner Minshew, and that is the fact that Jonathan Taylor has been ruled out effectively. He is out for 2 to 3 weeks with surgery that he had done on his thumb earlier today on Tuesday. So that might be good for Gardner Minshew. They might have to run more, but we did see Zach Moss be very successful when he was asked to lead this rushing attack. So I don't know about that either. Then Matt Stafford have at quarterback 17, and Cleveland is the worst quarterback matchup that there is. Silver lining here is that Cleveland will probably, certainly, be missing a couple of key pieces to that defense, which makes it so stifling. So maybe Matt Stafford is going to be getting the Cleveland Browns in a good matchup here, or a good time to end up facing them. Then for my fifth tier, we've got Kenny Pickett, Jake Browning, and Geno Smith. They're from quarterbacks 18 to 20. And ultimately for these three, I'm willing to take a gamble on them. I don't necessarily feel uncomfortable. Well, I don't feel fully comfortable playing them. And starting with Kenny Pickett, I'm hopeful. Jake Browning, I'll say extremely hopeful, because not that I'm so hopeful that I think it'll be great, but you look at what he's done over less than 2 game sample size here and how the projections take that. And the projections love it. He's been pretty solid over 1.5, 1 3/4 games so far this season. So I don't, going up against Jacksonville here too, I think that there is some upside to him. And then Geno Smith, hopeful from like a more pessimistic viewpoint. Going up against Dallas, not a good matchup. He hasn't been very good all season. But they'll almost certainly be operating from behind for the entirety of the game. Geno should be asked to pass the ball a fair bit, and that would work in favor of him, as you can see from the temperature gauge there too. You can see the rest of the quarterback rankings on the screen there while I go over my DFS buys of the week. If I'm spending up, I'm going to pay up for Tua Tagovailoa this week at $7,900. Seemed like a good deal for those top-priced guys. And at a mid-priced tier, I'm going back to the well here with Brock Purdy at $6,100, same price as last week. I do think that we're in a better matchup for Brock Purdy to come through this week, because Philadelphia's got a pretty good rushing defense. So I think that less will be expected of Christian McCaffrey on the ground. Maybe still through the air, he can get it done for sure. But I think a lot more is going to be run through Brock Purdy in this matchup. It's a good matchup for him. Then in the bargain bin, I've got Jake Browning at $5,100. I just kind of talked about that with the projections there. So no need to explain that. And now let's move on to the tight ends. All right, here we are with the tight ends. I've got that first tier up there, just a small tier of 3 this week for me, but you can look at that while I go over the Thursday slate. Those are obviously my must starts. And I will say real quick, actually, in regards to George Kittle, there's a 0% chance that I would be sitting him this week. Earlier this season, we thought in a similar type of matchup, a team that had a good pass rush, we thought George Kittle would be asked to block a lot in that game. And so generally he was a fade for a lot of analysts that week. I hadn't been coming, I don't think he had been very good up to that point in the season either. So I don't think what they did in that game was they used George Kittle to counter the rush. So I kind of expect there's a decent chance that will be the same game plan this week against Philadelphia. That's the short of it there. Now, when we look at my DFS buys last week on the Thursday slate, I said that I would take a chance to stack Kittle with Purdy. So obviously that did not end up working out, and I'm terrible at predicting the good and the bad weeks for George Kittle. So hopefully I am, hopefully that trend is not true this week, given that I have George Kittle, probably the highest I've had him ranked all season. Then on the Sunday slate, that was the Thursday slate. For the Sunday slate, I said that obviously I'd be happy to get either of my loves this week on my rosters, but if we're going to look at if we're going for a steep discount, I would take a shot on Jonnu Smith at $3,400. Luckily, I don't think I ended up taking a shot on him. He did have a goose egg outside of my my matchup, my fantasy team. I did take a shot on him there because I don't have many options, and that stunk. Then for my love'ems last week, I had Dalton Kincaid and Trey McBride. Dalton finished 18th in half PPR, Trey McBride 7th. So got one right, got one wrong there. And for my fades, I said Isaiah Likely. Everybody was too high on him. He finished 19th on the week. They were too high on him, so go me. Now, let's get to the second tier of tight ends. So obviously Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Sam Laporta, my top 3. And my second tier starts with Evan Ingram, followed by Trey McBride, Dalton Schultz, David Njoku, Logan Thomas, Pat Freiermuth, Jake Ferguson, and Taysom Hill at my tight end 11. And these are the guys who have been there and done it already this season. They've been pretty good, pretty close, as far as tight ends go, pretty much must-start territory here. But you might have two of these guys. And on top of that, for most of them, the matchup is also good. So that's what I'm just going to talk about with these guys. Evan Ingram is in the second best tight end matchup that there is going up against Cincinnati. So love that for him this week. Then for Trey McBride, this is an instance where it is not a great matchup. Pittsburgh is the 7th worst matchup for tight ends, so that's not overly exciting. However, as you can see, the heating gauge here as well, or the temperature gauge, whatever you want to call it, matchup gauge, I should get used to just calling it that. That makes the most sense. It does think that Trey McBride will have the ability to overcome a tough matchup against Pittsburgh, and I think so too. With all the targets that he gets, it's tough to imagine those disappearing, unless, of course, Zach Ertz returns. That is something to keep in mind. If he returns, probably would see Trey McBride go down in the rankings, not maybe by a whole lot, though. Then with Dalton Schultz, he's in the single best matchup that there is for tight ends this week, going up against Denver, and David Njoku is in the 4th best matchup for tight ends, going up against the Los Angeles Rams. Had to make sure I got that one right. And about David Njoku, too, P.J. Walker might return. And so he's been getting targeted and or done pretty well under any quarterback that they've had. And also, it might not even be P.J. Walker. Maybe it'll be, the ex-Baltimore guy. I can't think of his name right now. Then Logan Thomas I have in at my tight end 8 there. And this is the 10th best matchup against Miami. So we're getting towards kind of maybe just plus territory here for tight ends. But really like this matchup as Sam Howell was also my love at quarterback. And so I am expecting them to have to pass a lot. And I think that there's a very good chance that Logan Thomas could be on the receiving end of quite a bit of that in this matchup against Miami. And as you can see, the matchup gauge also thinks that there's a good opportunity for him this week to tally up the targets. And Pat Freiermuth, I have Jake Ferguson, both not in great matchups here. Arizona, Seattle, the 11th and 12th worst matchups for tight ends back-to-back. Also, not incredibly concerned about the fact that they're tougher matchups. I still think that they can be had by a tight end. And then Taysom Hill, the non-tight end, is in the 11th best tight end matchup here. But same as last week's concerns for him that I had is that even though it's a good tight end matchup, well, Taysom Hill doesn't really operate out of the tight end spot too often. And it was a bad running back matchup. So I didn't like Taysom Hill's upside last week too much. Did maybe a little bit better than I expected, but didn't work out too well. And it's a very similar setup this week. Detroit's a really good tight end matchup, and they have a really good rushing defense. But silver lining here, the team might have to utilize Taysom Hill quite more, being short potentially their top 3 wide receiving weapons this week. So I will probably be moving Taysom up higher in my rankings on the Saturday video, but I still have to think a little bit more on that. Let's move on to my third tier, which is a tiny tier. Tight ends 12 and 13, Kyle Pitts, Cade Otton, and it's not that I want to, but I'm going to trust these two if I'm in a spot where that's what I have to do. I wrote down just roll my eyes for Kyle Pitts, so just pretend that I rolled my eyes. And for tight end 13, Cade Otton, the question once again comes down to, can Rachaad White take advantage of a good matchup? If they can rely on the rushing attack here against Carolina, there's going to be fewer opportunities for all of the weapons. And I do think that there is a semi-decent shot that they can. So that is why I'm fading Cade Otton, but also I don't know that it's a for sure thing that Rachaad White will be able to take advantage of this excellent matchup, at least not completely. So Cade Otton could still see a fair amount of targets, I would say. I still like his floor, but I am very concerned about any kind of ceiling, which is not really what you get from Cade Otton anyways. That's going to bring us to the final tier for the tight ends that I'm going to cover, with Juwan Johnson in at tight end 14, followed by Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Conklin, Chig Ozium Okonkwo, Tanner Hudson, Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee, and Donald Parham Jr. A little bit about each of these guys. Juwan Johnson saw his most targets on the season last week with Michael Thomas out in a good matchup A couple of the other receivers also going out throughout the game. We're going to see a similar situation this week. They're probably going to be more dire at the wide receiver spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add him into the second tier because I think it's very possible that I might end up moving him up ahead of potentially both of those guys and closer to that second tier even. So there, I have done that. And then Hunter Henry in at tight end 15, going against the Los Angeles Chargers last week. He had 0 targets, but the Chargers are the 5th best tight end matchup, so you like that. And you just look at the rest of the tier below this, and it doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence. So I think I'm willing to take a shot on that with Hunter Henry. Jonnu Smith last week was a bummer for him. Also had 0 targets. Was in my lineup. That stunk. And that's not, he's been on this downtrend for about the last half of the season up to this point, last 5-6 games maybe. And the good thing here for Jonnu Smith, though, the New York Jets are not a great tight end matchup. That is one of the areas of the field where you can try to beat the Jets if you wish to. So I still have some hope for him based on what he did earlier in the season, but getting less and less optimistic about that as the weeks go. Tight end 17, we have Tyler Conklin here, and where's the upside with Tim Boyle at the quarterback? That's the big concern there. Chig, he had 6.5 points last week in Week 12, his best week of the season. Yes, 6.5 points is the best week of the season for him in half PPR. There was really no change in his usage, though, so there's not something to look at to say, oh, I'm excited about him going forward, and Indianapolis is not necessarily a smash matchup. I wish I could trust Chig more. I would love to go out there and try him this week. But on the season, he is the EV tight end 27, EV equalized value. Very similar to average fantasy points per week. It is my own homebrewed statistic, but it just takes into account consistency. Then we got Tanner Hudson, and I might have to get him higher up in my rankings given how the projections do tend to like him there. Nice solid floor, not a bad ceiling either. However, I feel like no Joe Burrow here zaps most of that upside that we might think that he has anyways, but he did get, I think, like 5 targets last week, so that's not too bad. Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee is sitting down here at 20-21, and it's bad tight end matchups for them. I don't like it, and you can see the projections don't like them either a whole lot, but I do know that especially Tyler Higbee coming off a big week last week, and Donald Parham is just kind of sneaking his way into the end here for no reason in regards to the projections, but I do have a slight gut feeling that, like, if Gerald Everett, Donald Parham are down there near the end zone, which I assume that the Los Angeles Chargers will be in the red zone a couple of times, Donald Parham has as much of a chance or more to get a touchdown than Gerald Everett does, so kind of like that aspect for him. So there's the rest. My last tier there of guys not ranking this week: Hayden Hurst, Dallas Goedert, or Zach Ertz yet. Of course, that could change. Dallas Goedert's pushed into play. We'll see on Zach Ertz. All right, so when we look at my DFS options for tight ends, I chose for a good buy George Kittle at $6,200. I think he's the second most expensive tight end, but I have him ranked second, so I like it. I do expect he could be the tight end 1 this week very easily. In the discount bin, I found you Evan Ingram at $4,500, and I do want to point out there is nothing wrong with Logan Thomas at $3,600, but I did want to get you another name out there, and I do have Evan Ingram ranked higher anyways. And for a contrarian play, I'm going to give you Dalton Schultz. If you're looking to differentiate your lineup from the rest, I think he would be a good way to go because I'm pretty sure that people will be overlooking him based on those that are around him and the prices of those around him compared to his price at 5,000 DK bucks. So, and then of course include the fact that he just had a terrible performance last week, and it's a really good matchup this week. I like it. And I do think that he'll be overlooked, at least to a certain extent. So that is it for my quarterbacks and my tight ends. Thank you very, very much. I'll have either my wide receivers, running backs video come out in the morning, and the other video, or come out in the afternoon today, the evening, and then tomorrow morning, the other position that did not get a video tonight. All right, peace out. I'll see you then.